I never thought I'd see the day when my own stepfather would threaten my mother's life. And when it finally happened, I realized I was the only one who could stop him. Growing up, my life looked almost picture-perfect to outsiders. We lived in a quiet suburb outside of Denver, in a modest brick front house with white shutters, the kind neighbors called cozy. My mother, Elaine, was the kind of woman who could make anyone feel at home. She worked as a school librarian, always had a pot of tea ready, and filled the walls with framed quotes about kindness and perseverance. People adored her. When she remarried after my father passed away, I told myself it was good. She deserved happiness. That's how Alan entered our lives, a tall man with a deep, calm voice and a reputation for being responsible. He worked in construction management, wore pressed shirts, and always seemed to know the right thing to say in public. To everyone else, he was a rock. To my mom, he was a second chance. At first, things seemed fine. Dinners together, weekend trips to the mountains, even family game nights where Alan tried, awkwardly, to crack jokes. Mom glowed in those moments, and seeing her smile after years of widowhood made me want to believe. I was 18 when they married, already half out the door to college, so I didn't scrutinize the cracks. But cracks existed. It was in the way Alan's smile disappeared the second guests left. The way he joked about Mom spending too much at the grocery store. Or how his hand sometimes lingered a little too firmly on her shoulder when she answered him wrong. He never exploded in front of others, only in the safety of four walls. And Mom? She brushed it off. He's just stressed from work, honey. Don't worry. I worried. But at that age, I didn't know what to do. By the time I finished college and got my first apartment downtown, I'd grown used to a delicate rhythm with Alan. Polite hellos, short visits, and me trying not to rock the boat. I still came home on Sundays for Mom's pot roast dinners, but I always kept one eye on her, trying to read the silent messages in her smile. Life moved on. I got a job in marketing, worked long hours, made friends. Outwardly, everything was stable. Alan even offered to help fix things in my apartment sometimes, trying to play the role of supportive stepfather. He gave advice on budgeting, car maintenance, real-world survival. If you saw us at the grocery store together, you'd think we were a normal family. But I noticed subtle things. Mom's shoulders tense when he entered a room. The way she always apologized first if they argued. The faint bruises she sometimes explained away as clumsy accidents. Each time I asked, she waved it off. Ellie, don't overthink. I'm fine. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Then there were the finances. Mom, who once had neat little savings envelopes for everything, utilities, groceries, even vacations, suddenly seemed tight on money. When I asked why, she said Alan had better ways of managing it. He handled the bills now. She laughed nervously whenever I pressed. It was like watching a slow eclipse. Light fading bit by bit, replaced with a shadow nobody else seemed to notice. My mother was disappearing inside her own house, and Alan's grip tightened without ever leaving marks deep enough for outsiders to call abuse. False stability. That's what it was. Everything looked calm, functional, maybe even enviable. But if you looked closely, if you stayed long enough inside that house, you could feel the cracks widening under your feet. And then came the night when I overheard him on the phone. I'd stopped by unannounced, bringing Mom her favorite lemon scones from the bakery near my office. She was upstairs folding laundry, humming softly. Alan stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, harsh. No, she won't be a problem. She knows better. But if she doesn't listen, he paused. I'll make sure she regrets it. Permanently. The words sliced through me like glass. My mother. He was talking about my mother. He ended the call quickly when he saw me, flashing that public-friendly smile. Hey, kiddo. Just work stuff. But my stomach turned cold. For the first time, I knew with absolute clarity, the stability we'd all been pretending was real had been a mask. And it was about to shatter. The night I overheard Alan's chilling words, something shifted inside me. It was as though every uneasy glance, every forced smile, every bruise my mother brushed off had suddenly aligned into a terrifying picture. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, Alan's voice replaying in my head. I'll make sure she regrets it. Permanently. But the Rayall warning bell didn't come from that phone call alone. It came in the days that followed, in the unmistakable way Alan began to act. Bolder, colder, as though he sensed the walls closing in and decided to double down. The first incident was at Sunday dinner. I came home, determined to keep a close eye on him. Mom had made her usual roast chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes, and a side salad. The house smelled comforting, but the atmosphere was tense. Alan carved the chicken with deliberate slowness, his jaw tight. Ellie, he said suddenly, without looking up. Do you plan on visiting more often now? Or are you just here to criticize how I run this house? The question blindsided me. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. I just wanted to see Mom, I said carefully. Mom quickly jumped in, forcing a laugh. Of course she just wanted to visit. Don't be silly, Alan. He stared at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good. Because this house runs fine without backseat drivers. It wasn't the words themselves, but the way he said them, like a warning. The second bell came 2 days later. I called Mom after work, just to check in. Her voice was flat, exhausted. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine, sweetie, she whispered. Then, almost too quiet to hear, don't call me when he's home. My chest tightened. My mother, who once filled every phone call with warmth and chatter, was now asking me not to reach out, for her safety. That same week, she forgot to meet me for our regular coffee date. When I went by the house to check on her, she opened the door with dark circles under her eyes and a forced smile. I'm just tired, honey. Really? But when she turned, I caught sight of a bruise blooming across her collarbone, hastily hidden under her sweater. I wanted to scream, but she pressed a finger to her lips, silently begging me not to. The third warning bell was the loudest, and it came directly from Alan himself. It was late one night when I was driving Mom home from her book club. Alan had insisted she skip it, but for once she stood her ground, claiming she'd promised the ladies she'd bring cookies. I offered to pick her up. When we pulled into the driveway, Alan was already waiting outside, leaning against the porch rail. His smile was tight, his eyes cold. Elaine, he said smoothly, ignoring me. You're late. Mom's hand gripped mine on the console, trembling. He walked around to my side of the car, bent down, and peered through the open window. His cologne hit me first. Sharp, overpowering. Then his words, you know, Ellie, sometimes daughters don't realize when they're crossing boundaries. Family business isn't yours to meddle in. I met his gaze, forcing myself not to flinch. If by family business you mean threatening my mother, then yes, it is. His lips curled into something between a smirk and a snarl. Careful, he murmured. You might regret sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. He straightened and walked back inside without another word. Mom sat frozen, her face pale. Please, she whispered. Don't push him. But how could I not? The bells weren't whispers anymore. They were deafening alarms. Alan wasn't hiding his control now. He was flaunting it, testing boundaries, letting me know he was aware of my suspicions and daring me to act. And if I didn't, then my mother's life, her very existence, would remain in his hands. That was the first true warning. Alan had crossed from subtle int asterisk medation into open threat, and it was only going to escalate from there. The weeks after Alan's porchside warning felt like living inside a tightening cage. Every day, he found new ways to tighten control over my mother, and every day, I felt more helpless, more furious, more determined not to let him win. It began with her phone. One evening when I called, she answered on speaker, her voice clipped and awkward. In the background, I could hear Alan shuffling papers. Hi, sweetie, she said. I can't talk long, Alan needs me. Then the line went dead. Later, when I saw her alone, she confessed in a whisper. He checks my phone now. Every call, every text. If he sees your name too often, he'll get suspicious. Her words hit like a punch. My mom, the same woman who used to send me silly gifts at midnight just to say she loved me, now terrified of contacting her own daughter. Then came the finances. I noticed she'd stopped carrying her own credit card. At lunch one afternoon, she paid with cash, her hands trembling as she counted out the bills. Where's your card? I asked. She lowered her voice. He keeps them. Says he's better at managing money. My chest burned. This wasn't just control. It was isolation, systematic, deliberate. He was cutting her off from every tool she might use to escape. Even her friends started disappearing. Mom, once the life of her book club, began missing meetings. She stopped going to church, claiming she was too tired. But I knew the truth. Alan didn't want her around anyone who might notice the bruises or the hollow look in her eyes. The scariest moment came one night when I stopped by unexpectedly. The house was dark, the curtains drawn. I let myself in with the spare key she'd given me long ago. What I found made my blood run cold. Mom was sitting on the living room floor, her knees pulled to her chest, tears streaking her face. Alan stood over her, his hand raised mid-gesture, though he froze when he saw me. What's going on? I demanded. He smiled thinly, lowering his hand. Family discussion. Private matter. Mom's eyes darted to mine, silently pleading. I stepped forward, shaking. If you ever touch her again, Alan chuckled. Careful, Ellie. You're making accusations you can't prove. That night, I begged Mom to leave with me. Pack a bag. We'll go now. My apartment is small, but we'll figure it out. She shook her head violently. He'll find me. He always finds me. And if I run, he'll make good on his threats. He said he'd. Her voice broke. He said he'd make sure you suffer if I try. The words rooted me to the spot. He wasn't just holding her hostage. He was holding me too. From then on, Alan's tactics grew more sinister. He followed me once, his truck in my rearview mirror all the way to my apartment. Another time, I found a note slid under my door. You should focus on your own life. She's mine to handle. My friends began to notice my paranoia. Haley pulled me aside one afternoon. You're distracted, jumpy. What's going on? I wanted to tell her everything, but Alan's threats echoed in my ears. If I involved anyone else, would he lash out even harder? Isolation wrapped tighter around us both. Mom began to shrink before my eyes. She moved slower, spoke less, avoided eye contact. Sometimes she'd startle awake from nightmares, clutching her chest. She once whispered, I feel like I'm disappearing. And I couldn't deny it. Alan had built a prison without walls. No locks, no bars, just fear and control so complete that leaving felt impossible. But as much as he tried to suffocate us, something in me hardened. Watching my mother crumble wasn't breaking me, it was forging me. I couldn't let her fade away. I started documenting everything. The bruises, the texts, the note under my door. I wrote down dates, times, conversations. If Alan thought he could erase us in silence, he was wrong. Because even in isolation, I was planning. Waiting. And I promised myself this. The next time Alan slipped, the next time his mask cracked, I'd be ready to act. Sometimes the truth comes to you quietly, like a whisper you almost miss. Other times, it slams into your life like a freight train. For me, it was the latter. It started with Rosa. She was one of Mom's closest friends from the library, a quiet woman with kind eyes and a knack for remembering everyone's favorite books. I hadn't seen her in months, not since Alan began isolating Mom from her circle. One evening, as I was leaving work, Rosa appeared outside the office, clutching her purse like she was carrying dynamite. "Ellie," she said urgently, glancing over her shoulder, "we need to talk. About your mother." My stomach dropped. We walked to a nearby coffee shop, where she handed me a flash drive. "I don't have much time," she whispered. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. On the drive were email exchanges between Alan and a contractor he worked with. At first, I didn't understand why Rosa had them, until she explained. "He used my work computer once, years ago. He didn't log out of his account. I copied some things, just in case. Something about him always felt wrong." I plugged the drive into my laptop that night, sitting at my kitchen table with shaking hands. What I found made me feel like the ground had disappeared beneath me. The emails revealed that Alan wasn't just controlling, he was hiding something far darker. He was siphoning money from construction projects, inflating budgets, and pocketing the difference. One thread detailed how he planned to funnel nearly $200,000 into a personal account. But buried between the financial schemes was something worse: threats. In one message, he wrote to his partner, "Elaine is asking questions. If she doesn't shut up, I'll handle it. She's replaceable. The daughter too, if necessary." Replaceable. He was talking about my mother, about me. I sat frozen, my hands numb on the keyboard. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't just **midation. This was premeditated. He wasn't bluffing when he threatened her life. He had thought it through, written it down. The next morning, I confronted Mom gently, showing her a printed copy of the emails. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "He hides papers, locks drawers, takes calls outside. But I never imagined," she trailed off, shaking her head. For the first time, she admitted what I had long suspected. Alan had shoved her during arguments, controlled every dollar, and once even hinted that if she made a scene, he'd make sure I never finished college. She'd stayed silent to protect me, but in the process, she'd become a prisoner. That night, something inside her cracked open. Instead of begging me to stay out of it, she grabbed my hand and said, "We have to stop him." It was the first time she'd said we. From then on, everything sharpened. I began compiling a dossier: emails, photos of bruises, notes I'd taken about his threats. Mom smuggled copies of financial statements from the drawer he thought she didn't know about. Rosa agreed to testify if it came to it. But the biggest revelation came when Jenna, the legal aid attorney Haley had connected us to, examined the evidence. Her expression hardened as she scrolled through the files. "Ellie," she said, "this isn't just domestic abuse. This is fraud, blackmail, and conspiracy. If we build this case carefully, he won't just lose, he'll go to prison." For the first time in months, hope felt real. But revelations cut both ways. Just as we discovered Alan's secrets, he began to sense ours. He came home earlier than usual one evening to find Mom rifling through papers. He didn't catch her with anything incriminating, but the suspicion in his eyes was unmistakable. That night, he followed me to my car again. As I fumbled with my keys, he leaned in close and hissed, "You think you're clever? You think you're saving her? I see everything. And when the time comes, you won't even know what hit you." It should have broken me. Instead, it steeled me, because now I knew his darkest secret, and I wasn't going to let him bury my mother, or me, with it. The revelation wasn't just that Alan was dangerous. It was that we finally had the proof to bring him down. Once the truth was out in the open, the fear that had gripped me for months transformed into determination. For the first time, Mom and I weren't just reacting to Alan, we were preparing to fight back. And that made all the difference. Jenna, the attorney, mapped out a strategy with the precision of a general. "We need to hit him where it hurts, his reputation and his finances. Men like him live on control. If we strip that away, he'll unravel." So, we began gathering everything. Rosa provided witness testimony about his threats. Mom compiled years of strange financial transactions Alan had tried to keep hidden. I added my documentation: the dates, the bruises, the notes, even the ominous messages I'd received. Piece by piece, we were building a fortress of evidence. But Jenna warned us, evidence means nothing if it never sees daylight. He'll try to bury it. You need to think about the moment this all goes public. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Alan was set to host a gala for his construction firm, a high-profile event designed to show off his success. Local officials, investors, and business partners would be there. It was the perfect stage to expose him. The plan was risky, maybe even reckless, but it was our only **T. Jenna arranged for a journalist from a local investigative paper to attend undercover, equipped with a copy of the evidence. Rosa would text me the moment Alan took the podium. That was our cue. The week leading up to the gala was suffocating. Alan grew more suspicious, more erratic. He began checking Mom's car mileage, asking why she'd been out too long. He hovered near me during visits, his eyes sharp, his words laced with poison. "Funny how much time you've been spending around here, Ellie. Don't you have your own life to worry about?" One night, I caught him rifling through my bag when I'd left it on the counter. I slammed it shut, glaring at him. He only smiled. Everyone has secrets, don't they? It was a reminder that he knew we were hiding something too. Finally, the night of the gala arrived. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air thick with the scent of expensive wine and perfume. Alan moved through the crowd like a king, shaking hands, laughing loudly, soaking in admiration. Mom and I slipped in quietly, hearts pounding, Jenna's words echoing in my head. Stay calm. Stick to the plan. When the moment comes, you'll know. And then the moment came. Alan stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. Cameras flashed as he launched into a speech about honesty, growth, and family values. The hypocrisy made my stomach churn. That's when Rosa's text buzzed on my phone. Now. My hands shook as I hit send, forwarding the evidence packet to every major contact Jenna had lined up. Journalists, regulators, even Alan's own investors. Simultaneously, the undercover reporter slipped a flash drive into the presentation laptop. Halfway through Alan's speech, the projector behind him flickered. Instead of graphs of profits, the audience saw screenshots of his emails, financial records, and finally, the message where he called my mother and me replaceable. Gasps filled the room. Murmurs swelled into outrage. Alan froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. "What is this?" he barked, spinning toward the screen. The journalist stood, camera flashing. "The truth, Mr. Brooks. Care to comment?" Chaos erupted. Investors demanded answers. Officials whispered urgently. Alan's mask shattered, and for the first time, he looked small, cornered. He tried to bluster, to shout that it was all lies, but the evidence was undeniable. Security moved in as the journalist streamed everything live. By the end of the night, Alan wasn't the powerful man everyone admired. He was a fraud, a bully, and a criminal under investigation. Mom clutched my hand so tightly it hurt, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. But even in that moment of victory, I knew it wasn't over. Men like Alan didn't crumble quietly. Exposure was only the first blow. The real fight, the final showdown, was still ahead. The gala had detonated Alan's carefully built empire, but instead of retreating, he came back swinging. The fallout was immediate. His investors pulled funding, the firm suspended him pending investigation, and the media hounded him with questions about fraud and abuse. Yet despite the mounting pressure, Alan didn't disappear quietly into the shadows. He turned his fury on us. First came the late-night calls. My phone would ring at 2 a.m., the number blocked. When I answered, silence followed by his voice. "You think this is over? You don't know what over looks like." Then came the stalking. I'd leave work to find his truck parked across the street, engine idling, his silhouette barely visible. He never got out, never spoke, but the message was clear. Mom grew more fragile each day. She'd jump at every knock on the door, every unexpected sound. "He won't stop," she whispered. "He'll K*LL us before he lets us win." But I refused to let him see me break. Instead, I doubled down. Jenna coordinated with law enforcement, pushing for a restraining order, while the journalist published follow-up stories, each one more damning than the last. Still, the legal system moved slowly, and Alan knew how to exploit that delay. The showdown came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find our apartment door cracked open. My stomach lurched. I pushed it wider and froze. Alan was inside, sitting calmly on the couch like he owned the place. "Evening, Ellie," he said smoothly. "We need to talk." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "Get out," I hissed, gripping my phone. He chuckled. "You think a little evidence, a few journalists, can take me down? I've built a life on people being too scared to follow through. And your mother, she knows fear better than anyone." I texted Jenna's emergency code under the table, my fingers trembling. But Alan noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Always scheming, aren't you? Just like her. Maybe I should remind you what happens when people don't listen." He stood, stepping closer. My breath caught, but I forced myself not to move back. "You won't touch her again," I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at me. "Because everyone's watching now. Every move you make is documented. You're finished." For a moment, rage twisted his face, the mask ripped away. His hand clenched into a fist, and then the pounding on the door came. "Police! Open up!" Alan froze. Jenna had delivered. Officers stormed in, shouting commands. Alan tried to protest, but within seconds he was face down on the floor, his wrists cuffed. Mom rushed in behind them, sobbing as she clutched me. The officers read Alan his rights, the words almost drowned out by the pounding of my heart. As they dragged him out, he ****************** me one last look, pure venom. "This isn't the end," he spat. But it was. For the first time, the threat no longer held power. He wasn't the man in control. He was a criminal in custody. The final showdown hadn't been some cinematic brawl. It had been about holding the line, refusing to cave to his ******* long enough for the truth to trap him. When the door closed behind him, Mom collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking. "It's over," she whispered. And this time, I believed her. The night Alan was dragged from my apartment in handcuffs marked the end of one battle, but it didn't erase the war we had endured. Healing wasn't instant. It came slowly, like dawn seeping across a horizon, inch by inch until the shadows finally retreated. In the weeks that followed, Mom and I lived with a strange mix of relief and paranoia. Even though Alan was denied bail and held in county jail, she still double-checked every lock, still flinched when the phone rang. Trauma lingers long after the danger is gone. But for the first time in years, there was also laughter in our home. Real laughter. The kind that bubbled up when we made burnt pancakes on a Saturday morning or when we watched old home movies of my dad. The legal system ground forward, slow but relentless. With the evidence Jenna presented, emails, financial records, testimonies from Rosa and others, Alan's case grew airtight. Fraud, blackmail, coercion, harassment, even burglary from breaking into my apartment. He faced years behind bars. When the trial came, the jury barely needed a day to deliberate. Guilty on nearly every count. Mom sat beside me in the courtroom, tears streaming down her face as the verdict was read. "I thought he would destroy us," she whispered. "But we survived." For her, survival meant rebuilding. She went back to her book club, to her friends at the library, reclaiming the pieces of herself Alan had stolen. I watched her shoulders straighten again, her laughter return, her light come back. The woman who once said she felt like she was disappearing was alive again, more alive than I'd seen in years. For me, survival meant change. Documenting everything, fighting back, working with Jenna, it had ignited something inside me. I switched career paths, applying to law school with a focus on advocacy. I wanted to be the person other families could call when someone like Alan tried to silence them. Haley joked that I'd turned into a real-life superhero, but the truth was simpler. I had seen how easy it was for abuse to hide in plain sight, how silence became a prison. I refused to ever let that happen again, to anyone. The community, too, rallied. Rose's bravery inspired other workers from Alan's firm to speak out about corruption. Together, they forced reforms in the company, demanding accountability. What had started as our private nightmare became part of a larger fight for justice. Months later, Mom and I visited my father's grave. She laid fresh flowers, and we stood quietly for a while. Then she said, "I used to pray for someone to save me. I didn't realize it would be you." I squeezed her hand. "You saved yourself, Mom. I just reminded you you weren't alone." That's the thing about monsters like Alan. They thrive in darkness, in secrecy. But once exposed to the light, they lose their power. We had faced him, exposed him, and survived him. The scars will always be there. Emotional ones, invisible but deep. But scars are proof that you've healed, not that you're broken. Today, when I look at my mother laughing with her friends, when I sit at my desk studying case law late into the night, when I remember the girl I used to be, afraid, unsure, paralyzed by threats, I realize something. Alan thought his threats would silence me. Instead, they gave me my voice. He threatened my mother. And that was the mistake that destroyed him.